Today I'm going to show you a bit about test-driven development with Holochain. I've written an article here which I'll link in the video at the end, and what we're going to do is have a look at clutter, which you can get from GitHub as well. So all the code that I'm about to show you is all in this project. There's also on our developer docs some documentation on test-driven development, which I'll refer to a bit later on. So let's have a look. So we'll go back to clutter and a quick review of a Holochain app. We have a DNA folder and a test folder and some UI stuff. So in the DNA folder we have what are called zones. So here we have an anchor zone and a clutter zone, and then the tests are down here. And if you have a look in the DNA JSON file, you'll see the names of the zones as well. And a new feature in a recent edition of Holochain is the ability to handle how you do errors. So I've got it to throw errors here because that's what I'd like to happen. So the first thing I'm going to look at is how to do a single agent test. And because Holochain is multi-agent, you should test in multi-node setups as well, which we'll get to in a little while. But first off, a nice simple way to do some testing is just to write a test under the test folder in a file called whatever you want to call your tests.json. And the test structure is this: it's an array, and each of these ones is a test. This is the your intention for the test. This is the name of the zone. So in ours we're going to test this clutter zone. The function name we're going to test is called new handle. So if I go into clutter, there is a function here called new handle. And if we have a look through it, the return, so there's a whole lot of anchor stuff here which we're not going to cover. What I wanted to show you was here it creates a new handle in Holochain, and we're storing that value, and it commits another one for links and another one for another link, but it's returning that original hash key. So just keep that in mind while we have a look at this test. So let's go back to the test. So we're testing the function new handle. We're going to input the string Buffalo Bill, and the test that I want the result that I want is H2. What that refers to is H would be the last entry on the hash chain, H1 is the one before, and H2 is two before that. Hence, when we looked at the code here, we got that would be H, it then becomes H1, and then it becomes, H1, and then it would become H2 because these two are committed afterwards. So back to the test, and you can run those tests quite easily by doing hcdev test, and I only want to run the one, so I'm just going to do posts. Is that what it was called? Yeah, posts, and there we go. So you can see here it started off the post test. It's got a whole lot of debug stuff in there with this tool called Mermaid. If you haven't heard of that, you should check it out. It's good for doing all sorts of cool software drawings. And the results of the test, passed here, passed, etc. That was for a single node, so you can see it copied the chain to users Holochain dev, and in there there'll be an instance of clutter now. Alright, so just go back to the article and see what was next. Alright, so one thing you might want to do too is test for errors. So if we go back to our tests, you can see here we're testing that post must have a non-zero length, and we're using the same zone, but the function name is now called post, and that's expecting this input of a post object, and I'm expecting it to fail with the validation failed because the value for message is empty. So if we have a look at the post.json file, you'll see why that fails. It's because message is marked as a required field. And if we go and look at that test, which was post must have a non-zero length, you can see that it passed. Alright, so that's all fun and games. There are heaps of different strings that you can check for replacements on if you go to the test-driven development page in the developer docs. scroll down here, you can see all these different things you can test for. Things like, your agent, always forget that I'm in edit mode. And previous results, different distances back in the hash chain, all sorts of things. But sometimes you don't want to test for a value, you want to test for something else. You want to check to see if maybe there was a correct number of things in an array, but that's not the kind of result that's returned from the method. So if we have a look in this test, which is a scenario test which I'm about to tell you about, but I wanted to show you this first. You can set this value raw to true, and then it will evaluate what you put in on the input line. So here I'm saying when we run the getHandles method in the clutter zone, I'm expecting the length to come out as 1, and the output needs to be true. And if this is true, then the test will pass. Really neat. So you can do all sorts of crazy things like you can do like JSON pass and pass a whole lot of stuff in there. You can do things like call API calls directly in Holochain, like make hash, and check that your code's working correctly. So it's a really flexible way of being able to do tests that aren't just specifically about results. Alright, let's go back and have a look at what's called a scenario test. Now, scenario tests are vital in testing Holochain because you've got all your different agents and they all need to interact. So and they interact via the DHT, and the DHT runs on the gossip protocol. So that happens on a regular occasion. And if you look in the this collision of handles scenario, there's a config file. You can see here that every half a second gossip is going to talk between the nodes. So you have to give your tests a little bit of time to propagate. Alright, so what happens here is we've now got 3 agents, Art, Jane, and Joe. And when you run this scenario, each of these is going to run up as a separate agent and be able to do different things. So Jane is the first one off the block. She has a test that runs and there's no time specified. See how this one has a time? This one is going to run first. So Jane's going to create a handle, and I'm expecting the output to be the same as that test we looked at before, and there's 2 back in the row. And then at time 4 seconds, I want Jane to check to make sure she's only got 1 in the list of handles in the DHT. Joe is the next one. So at time 8 seconds, and these are, I was just messing around with times, but these can be anywhere down to 1 or 2 seconds. So Joe is going to set up a new handle with the name Archer, and again 2 back in the row. Then a second later, it's going to check to make sure that, there should be 2. There's 2 in the list, and then Art is the last one. And at time 12 seconds, he tries to use the same handle, which is going to cause a collision, and the output should be handle in use. And then when he does the test to see how many handles there are, there should still be 2. Now there's a trick to running scenario tests, and that is that you need to specify this. MDNS equals true, because that allows each of the agents to gossip with each other. So let's run this. I'll run the collision of handles on that we just looked at. Alright, let's run that. And you'll see that up the top here, it started up 3 different chains. So it's got one for Art, one for Jane, and one for Joe. And if we just go and have a look in that directory, you see there's the 3 folders. And these are instances of clutter with their own chains and DHTs. Kind of cool. Very cool, actually. And then what you can see is as the tests are running, the agent name is on the left here, and that tells you what's going on. So Jane ran this test, can retrieve a list of all handles, and that passed. And then Joe is doing something at 8 seconds. and got a false, I've got a broken test here for some reason, who knows, handle in use, okay, so this is the, sometimes the DHT doesn't work, there's intermittency, I'm not really sure what's going on there, but if I run that again, hopefully it should work this time. But the cool thing about it is you can see the different actors, agents, as things are happening down the side here. There we go, all the tests passed. So that is a quick overview of testing. I'll just go back to my article to make sure I didn't miss anything that I wanted to tell you about. Scenario testing. Nope, that's it. Okay, thank you.